seasons change, but I'm stuck in this pattern for every little.
Hi guys! It's about that time of the month. You know, it's the 30th. It's time for us to talk about all the books that I read. I have them all laid out here, and we're going to briefly discuss every single book that Sam and I read this month in a one DNF. Listen, but it was a soft DNF, and we'll get to it when we get to it because I swear we're going to get to it. It's just, it's not the right time. But anyways, I have them all laid out here. We read 10 books with one DNF. I have my little Notion guy. Without further ado, here we go. First book that we read this month was The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharpe. Now, we rated this book a 4. It's a YA thriller. It was 356 pages, and whenever I say the page numbers, I'm not including any sort of epilogue, just because I know some people choose not to read them. So whenever I say page count, I'm only going to give the one for like what was the actual story. A couple things that we really liked about this book that I want to highlight are there was a little bit of LGBT in here. Again, it's YA, so it read pretty good for a YA in my opinion. I mean, there were certain times where I could feel the YA, but like if you don't want spice, because there's no spice in here, then I'd pick this up. If you want a thriller that's fast, if you want something that keeps moving, if you want something that reads like a YA without feeling like a little kid story, I totally recommend. I definitely love when it comes to this author. She put in, I said this in the video that, I think this was in the 5-star video, resources for all types of the hotlines, because she does briefly talk about different kinds of abuse in the book. And then she also has a little note because briefly a medical condition was brought up, and she just gives a little description how even though she highlighted a couple things about that medical condition, that's not all that it represents. And I really, really, really appreciated that. Again, I highly recommend. You know what I mean? If you watched my romance video, you know that this book literally changed my life. And I mean that so seriously, because even though you may read this and you may not think that it was absolutely life-altering, it made me a romance girly. If it's able to completely change the way I feel like about an entire genre, I feel like that's important. Rated this a 5-star. It's 430 pages, again, romance, and I am highlighting that series with a little asterisk because it's the type of series where everything's in the same world, but you don't have to read anything in order. You don't have to read any of the other books if you don't want to. They're all just in the same world, and like some of the characters start to overlap, so you may or may not pick something up and then something kind of gets spoiled. But we read this book without reading the other 2 in the series. We didn't know anything else about it, and we felt, I mean, obviously I rated it 5 stars. And I really like that this book didn't depend on spice to carry the romance. Like, there is some of that in here, but it didn't make me feel like the only reason these characters were getting to be together was because they were attracted to each other. It was all these other reasons, you know, like the main character, the guy in here, he's such a sweetie, he's taking care of his family. The girl is a nurse and she's working hard and is independent, all this kind of stuff. And I just feel like they were too busy, honestly, for that to be their main focus. Like, they had too much stuff going on. They had family troubles, they had job issues, they were moving, but there's all this stuff going on in this book, and it wasn't just about the romance. And I love that it wasn't just about physical attraction, that they had like a funny little arrangement going on, because I feel like there are too many books that just jump straight into the spice, or it's physical attraction first, and that's just not my jam. I want them to actually love each other, and they did love each other. The whole concept of this book is there's a girl named Emma, a guy named Justin. They both say that every time they go on a date, that the person that they break up with ends up finding the love of their life. So they contact each other through the internet and make a joke about it that maybe they should date each other, and then they'll be able to find the love of their lives after they break up. And then of course, you know what happens, of course. If I recommend one thing, it's this. Magnolia Parks was the next book that we read, 430 pages. It is part of a series. We rated it a 3, and again, this is, I'm doing another little asterisk. We have it. It's romance, but it's not the kind of romance that you're necessarily rooting for. The couple is very, very toxic. And so the entire time, even though the main thing about it is there's a bunch of romance going on, it's not necessarily things that you want, you know? So it's like in the romance genre, but it's not anything that you should be like hoping for, wanting for yourself, copying by any means, living vicariously through. No, none of that is what you should be doing for this book. It's just really a story with romance. You know what I'm saying? We felt kind of like iffy about this book because, again, the couple is very toxic, and so the way that they were going about certain things made us both feel really icky. And we do want to give the Daisy Hates portion of the Magnolia Parks universe a try before we completely say no to this world, but it was definitely kind of hard. You know, I really was expecting for it to be something like magical because so many people loved this series and loved this book, and I get why people like it, especially if you're into like Gossip Girl, drama, maybe like reality TV almost. Like if you're into that, that makes sense. If you're into fashion, that makes sense because there's a lot of fashion talk in here, a lot of like high class living in here, which I just don't relate to. So it was a little bit hard for me, but the writing is good. I definitely think that this author is really good at like having a good handful of quotes that are like powerful and move you, but the romance is just icky. Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher was the next book that we read. All these 3 books that I just said were in a romance video on my channel. 584 pages. We rated it 3.5. It's also another one of those where it's a series. You don't have to read the other ones, but you can if you want. And you know, it is definitely a book that I felt was a little too long. It dragged on. That's why we didn't rate it as highly as we could have, because it definitely could have ended a lot sooner. And so once it started feeling like it was dragging on, and like the beginning was really what dragged on, like it started to knock points in my mind. And there were just, for as big as it was, there wasn't enough of a slow burn. It was just kind of like rivals were together. While it was still good, obviously we gave it 3.5. That's kind of what made us give it a lower rating, just because for as big as it is, it should have had more tension than it did. But anyways, it's about Julian and Dahlia, and they are childhood rivals. They grew up together, constantly competing, trying to be smarter than the other, trying to be better than the other. All these years have passed. They come back to the same hometown. Their families are close, like family friends, and they have to do a project together because they are both in like the construction, design, art, interior, Love Redesigned world. And you see what happens then. The funny thing about this is that the main character, Julian, he is a billionaire. And watching him go through all of his billionaire day-to-day tasks is just so crazy to see, because obviously when you read any book, you're kind of like living vicariously through these people and like you're getting to see something you wouldn't normally see. But billionaires do exist. And that's what blew my mind, is because when I'm reading about a dragon slayer, it's just like all fun and games because it's not real. But a billionaire, like there are people that can drop money like how this man was dropping money. And that like blows my mind. Not realistic by any means for like the majority of people, but I recommend still. I think this is a good book if you need to just bring one book, like you're going somewhere like a plane or something like that, and you only can bring one book, but it needs to be big enough, but it also isn't complicated by any means. It doesn't take any brain power. I'd pick up this. This was King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This was 383 pages. We gave it a 3. It's romantasy and it is part of a series. So the main concept of this is that there are vampires in this world. There's a girl who's a princess, and in order to like save her kingdom, she has to go with this guy who is the king of all vampires, because he just randomly decides like, I want you, girl. She tries to kill him to like try to save her country. It doesn't work out, and he's like, if you try to kill me again, like I'm gonna change you into the undead, which is like her worst nightmare. And so then she has to try to be with him. This was a book that we really wanted it to be better than it was. It definitely, like, the ball was dropped, and that was unfortunate because it just seemed like such an interesting premise. It was gonna be such a good book, and then it just wasn't. This is a book where, like I was saying before, I'm not the kind of person that really likes physical attraction being like the main reason that someone's into each other. And this was like, you are sworn enemies, and there's nothing that would make you into each other, and then they're just from the very beginning with the spice, in the spice, all over the spice, and it just didn't make any sense. I just couldn't get into the romance side of it. And then the world, it just felt like it wasn't well developed. Rather than any sort of world building, it was like, oh, there's a monster, it's a blah blah blah, oh, there's another one, it's a blah blah blah. You didn't get to know that much of the world, in my opinion. I read like a Wattpad story where it was like, yeah, there's fantasy, but it's mainly about all this spice. I was expecting so much more. And then by the time that the more came, like at the end when it started to pick up, I had just gone through so much of the book already that I didn't care anymore. So the end, which I think made it go from like a 2.5 to a 3, it just didn't matter anymore because we had already gone so long. The next book that we read for that video was Kingdom of the Wicked. This is by Kerri Maniscalco. We love Kerri Maniscalco. If you've watched any of my videos from the very beginning, Kerri Maniscalco has been an inside joke between me and Sam, because I think it was either the first or second video that I ever posted on this channel. I think it might have been the first. I don't know. One of the first videos that I made for this channel, I was talking about Throne of the Fallen, and I went Kerri about this author, and so now it's a running joke on my channel. 389 pages, part of a series. It's a YA romantasy, and we rated it a 4. I think I ended up sticking with a 4, but I think Sam's at a 4.5. I'm not quite sure. I think in the video we say 4.5, but since then I've knocked it down to a 4. But not because it wasn't a good book. Like, I love this book. We're gonna read the next ones. Then I've kind of forgotten details of this book, and so I knocked it down to a 4 just because I feel like I'd be remembering more if it was a 4.5. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so basically this is about a girl who has a twin sister. They are both witches, and her twin sister ends up being found dead, and she has to interact with all kinds of demons, monsters of the underworld to try to figure out what happened to her sister. It's part of a trilogy, and Carrie Maniscalco has continued some of these characters into new adult books, so that's what Throne of the Fallen is. We read Throne of the Fallen, but then really wanted to know more about Prince of Wrath, who is the main guy in these 3 books. So we wanted to learn more about him, and because the other Princes of Sin are starting to get books other than Prince Envy, which is what Throne of the Fallen is about, we just wanted to know his story before we continue on with the other brothers. So we're reading this. It's really good. I felt like, again, it was a YA book that I went into thinking that it wasn't going to be that great, just because I always give young adult like so much crap for some reason, and it ended up being really, really good. The story is interesting, plot twists are interesting. It was really funny to see characters that I've already seen, but they've had so much character development since then. So seeing Prince Envy from Throne of the Fallen in this book and him being so different than what I've like known him as was really interesting. So this is definitely a book that we're gonna keep going with the series. The next book that we have, and this is the last book of that video, was Shatter Me by an author who I cannot pronounce their name. I'm sorry. But if you can say that, you're a real one, because maybe if someone said it to me, I could say it afterwards. But just off of my own, I don't want to disrespect you like that. So I'm just going to show you the author. But 327 pages, part of a series, a big series, like a big series. YA, dystopian, romancy, and we gave it a 3. So we went into this having like high hopes, because especially after a couple of the YAs that we had read this month, we thought this was going to be a lot better because we're like on a high for young adults, and it just wasn't what we wanted. It was definitely reading like a YA, and Sam and I are both at the age where when we were in middle school, that's when Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and all that dystopian stuff was coming out, and so anything dystopian just immediately flings me back to being a 6th grader, and there's nothing that I can do to get out of it. Like, there's just nothing. I don't care how good the story is. It doesn't even have to be young adult, but I think I made it worse. It could be a completely adult book, and I still wouldn't be able to not think of me being a 6th grader, because it was just such a big deal. Like, if you are reading or like can remember when it was like Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, like all of that stuff coming out was such a huge deal. Like, it literally took such a big chunk of my childhood that I just can't separate it. And especially because this was YA, it just flung me right back, and I just felt like I was too old. And it wasn't even because of the writing necessarily, it's just my own issues that I can't separate that time of my life with dystopian books. So again, that was me, but Sam feels the same way because we're the same age. So it was a little hard for us. Basically, the girl in this, she has like a touch of death slash like touch of extreme ouchie. So when she touches somebody, either they start to be in severe pain, or if she holds them long enough, they will die. And then that plus like being in a dystopian setting, whatever. Anyways, she's like in captivity for a while, and she has this notebook that she keeps writing in. And they have, I'm trying to find like an example like earlier on, so it's not a spoiler. But yeah, they do this a lot, where there's writing and then it's crossed out. And that's like an extreme example, but like it honestly just started to annoy me. Like, I don't know why, but it just started to annoy me so much. And it's not like that bad. Like, you can still read through it, but it was like the icing on the freaking top of the cake that I was like, forget it. I can't read this anymore. Which again, it's really not that serious. I just really think that we read this at the wrong time. If I was in middle school, I would have devoured this series. I know it. And it just wasn't the right time for us to read this. We may or may not give this a second chance. I really don't know. I think Sam's more open to it. See, oh here, look. That gets old after a while. But I mean, the writing wasn't bad. I just think it really read like a first in a fantasy, dystopian-y, whatever type series, where there's so much world building just for at the very end for things to start getting good. And the fact that we were so not into it for so much that like by the time things started to get good, it was so hard to care. But I said, if you like dystopian, I really would give this a shot. We just don't like dystopian books. So the rest of the books that I'm showing, the video for it hasn't been out yet, so you will be seeing like the reading vlog of this coming up soon. That's the next reading vlog that will be posted, but I'm a little delayed. The rest of these, you haven't seen them, but the video will be coming. But basically, None Shall Sleep, 382 pages, a YA thriller, part of a series, and we gave it a, my camera just randomly decided to stop recording. That's so funny. Anyways, we gave it a 4. It reminded me a lot of Criminal Minds. Basically, it's about these two teenagers. They get recruited by the FBI to help as interviewers to a serial killer that's killing only teenagers. So they get brought in because they have some special backgrounds that you'll learn about. It reminded me of Criminal Minds in like a fun way, not in like a wow, this is an exact copy and paste kind of way. Just like, oh, they're talking about FBI, they're talking about serial killers, and they're talking about the behavioral analysis kind of unit. So it reminded me of that. So if you like Criminal Minds and you want something that has a little bit of gore in it, but not too much, and is like a little bit of a thriller, but not too much. Anything that you could assume with like a YA thriller. This is really good. We have The Inmate. This was 318 pages, a psychological thriller. We gave it a 3, and it's a standalone. So this is about a girl who, when she's in high school, she is one of the victims of an assault / murders that occurred in the middle of the night. During a storm, her friends are at a party. They're all at a party with her boyfriend and her friends or whatever. A couple of them get killed, and she puts away her boyfriend at the time as the killer. All these years later in life, she goes back to her hometown, starts working at the prison that he works in, and all of a sudden doesn't know if it was him or not. We personally felt like Freida McFadden just isn't the author for us. We really didn't like the way that she writes, and so you'll see why when the video comes out, but it just, I don't know. It wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't as like, I just didn't like the plot twists as much as I thought I was going to. So again, we gave it a 3. Then, this book, this author, this world, this everything, 4.5. I love this author, Stuart Turton. He's the one that wrote 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I loved so much. I think we gave that a 5 stars. I don't have the page count because we literally just finished this, but it's like 300 something-ish. 346, I think. Yeah, 346 pages. It's a mystery, sci-fi-y, fiction, mumbo-jumbo kind of concoction. This author's books are really hard to try to say one specific genre just because he kind of goes all over the place. It's kind of his favorite thing to do. So every book that he writes is like a Mod Podge of a couple genres and like his own twist on the entire concept. So it's kind of hard to say a specific one, but we were really excited that we got the Barnes & Noble / signed edition of this book because again, we really like his work. So that was really exciting. But basically it's about a bunch of people that are on an island and there's fog surrounding the island. A murder takes place which triggers the fog to start coming in, and they need to figure out exactly what happened in order to stop the fog because the fog has killed the entire rest of the human race. So that's what this book is about. It's again the last murder at the end of the world, and we really liked it. The story was so complex, and the one thing that I will say, which again is highlighted in the video that hasn't come out yet, but if you're gonna pick up one of this author's books, you really have to go into it like ready to take some notes or ready to like really think about it, because it's not something that you can just jump into. This is not a quick read by any means. You have to have the brain power for it. Like, this is not something you read while you're falling asleep at night. Like, this is something that you really focus on because there's so much going on. Like, his books get rated like not super highly. They get like 3.8s around there, 3.7s, but it's because they're so complex that when you look through the reviews, a lot of people just are confused. So again, if you don't want to be confused, or if you don't think that you can read that kind of book, I don't recommend it. But if you think that that's the kind of book that you'd like Sam and I love like a really intricate story, and he did like a little afterward at the end, like a little author's note, and it was just so sweet. It literally made me cry because he's just such a sweet pie. Like, I don't know anything about this author, so I hope he's like actually a nice human being, because I don't know him like that obviously, but just the way that he was writing to like us as readers, he was like, I appreciate you so much. Like, you're just as much as part of this as I am. Like, I'm so glad that I'm able to take as big of a risk and have as much fun as I do with my writing because of you guys. Like, it was just so sincere and sweet, and it made me cry. So again, I highly recommend. Again, it's more complex. His 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is where you're jumping, like, it's complicated because you're jumping from completely different people all living the same day. So like, one day you're gonna be me, and then you go to bed and it's the same day, but now you're Sam, if that makes sense. And that's happening. And in this book, their memories have been wiped. So it's like he always has that like thing that makes it even more confusing, plus like so many characters and such an intricate world and a sci-fi edge that makes it like kind of real life but also not, and so there's a lot going on. So again, only read his books if you're like ready for the challenge, and then you'll eat it up. I swear you'll eat it up, because we literally, this is my favorite author. This is my favorite author. I said it. It's serious. Now, that was the last book that we completely read, and that was all of the books except for one on the June TBR. Now, here comes the part that I disappoint you. Because we didn't read this. No, we did not. I started it though. I started it, and then we softy and effed it because it's gonna be way too much. I mean, obviously it's a big book, and we knew it was a big book, and that's not necessarily why we're stopping. It's just, this book is so complex that there's a glossary. There's a glossary, there's an index, there's a timeline, there's literally like the people from this side of the map, the people from this side of the map, the people that are dead from this side of the map. Like, it literally has everything written out from you. Like, literally, look. Do you see that? Deceased. There's that much going on, and when I started reading it, I got like 20 pages in, and I just knew that I am not going to be able to give this book the chance that it deserves, because I don't have the time right now. Like, we are both super busy when it comes to like our work and trying to make videos and trying to have like all the personal things that we have to do, like everything involved with like our day-to-day. We just don't have the time for this right now, and our schedule in terms of reading is too jam-packed right now in terms of like the videos that we need to get done, and so we just picked this at the wrong time. It's a soft DNF because I really do want to read this, especially since I started it. I can see myself loving this. It's just I don't have the time to give it its fair shot, and I don't want to read it and give it a poor rating because I didn't have enough brain power to give it a fair chance. So we're soft DNFing this, but again, we are going to try and read it just another time, or like read it alongside other things. I don't know, but we don't have the time to give it a fair shot. But those are all the books. That was 10 total that we read, and the 11th we soft DNF'd. I really appreciate you watching this. I hope that you watch the video for these couple books that's going to come out soon. That'll be the next reading vlog that you see. So stay tuned for that to get a more like in-depth explanation of why we rated those books the way we did. But thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. You were literally the bestest, and stay silly.